of Birmingham and the Kiwanis Club of Birmingham is now called to order. Thank you everyone for joining us today, and a special welcome to all of our friends from Kiwanis who are with us today. As all of us know in the room, we do these joint meetings twice a year with our fellow Kiwanians and Rotarians, and it truly is one of the highlights of our year for both clubs. Joining us today to give the invocation and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance is Rotarian Don Sharp. Don is managing partner of Bradley, Arant, Bolt and Cummings LLP. Don, please stand for the invocation and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, President Brenda. Let's bow our heads. As we gather here today as members of Rotary and Kiwanis, we pray that we are ever mindful of the opportunity and privilege each of us has to render service to our fellow citizens, whether right here in our Birmingham community or oceans away. We are thankful for this day and its blessings, its opportunities, and its challenges. We pray that each of us may feel our responsibility to our community, to our country, and to all countries and peoples. As the return of spring renews growth in the world of nature around us, let us renew our commitment to give our best always and strive to make a better world. Bless our fellowship today, bless this food and the wonderful people who have prepared and served it, and keep us always mindful of just how fortunate we are. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Don. We are so happy to see so many Rotarians and Kiwanians here in person today. We thank Bill Wood and Dave Wood for serving as our greeters. Bill is a retired attorney and Dave is chairman emeritus of Wood Fruitiker Grocery Company. They will now introduce our guests. Good morning. Thank you for being our greeter today.
President Brenda, Secretary Chao, my pleasure to introduce our guests and visitors today. First, we'll introduce our visiting visitors and their hosts. If you will, please stand. And for everyone, please just stand and remain standing until all have been introduced so that we can welcome you all formally. Linda Backus is here today as a guest of her husband, Spencer. Becky Wilson is here today as a guest of Charlie Collette. Jack Drake is here as a guest of Don Sweeney. Alan Sweeney is here as a guest of Don Sweeney. Cliff Martin is here today as a guest of Cindy Martin. We also have with us today some Kiwanians who are guests. Ken Simon is here as a guest of John Saxon. Vince Perez is here as a guest of Ryan Hankins. And then we have some Rotaractors who are visiting with us today. Henry Joe is here. And bringing with him the Rotaract president, Cameron Shawlin. Casey Wright Haddon is here. Anna B. Fields and Alex Valencia. If you please stand. And then we have, those are our guests. If you will, let's welcome our visiting guests with a round of applause.
Well, thank you, Bill and Dave, and welcome to all of our guests today. Now it is my pleasure to welcome past President Eric Jack to the podium to share a special announcement. Eric is Dean of the UAB School of Business, Collette School of Business, and he's been a member of our club since 2013, also past president of our club.
Thank you, President Brenda. This is truly a historic year. Today, in honor of Women's History Month, I have the privilege of acknowledging a very special occasion that has never before occurred. For the first time in history, women are simultaneously at the helm of three of our city's great civic clubs, Kiwanis, Rotaract, and Rotary. I am pleased to recognize Lee Davis, who is the fourth female president of the Kiwanis Club of Birmingham. Lee is also Vice President of Economic and Community Development at Alabama Power. I'm also pleased to recognize Cameron Shevlin, the seventh female president of the Rotaract Club of Birmingham. Cameron is also Director of Annual Campaign at United Way of Central Alabama. And I'm proud to recognize our own Rotarian Brenda Hackney, the fourth female president of the Rotary Club of Birmingham. Brenda is also president of the Hackney Foundation. These women stand as a testament to the importance of diversity in leadership. We thank each of you for your service and for providing inspiration to women in our community and beyond. So please join me in congratulating these incredible female leaders.
Well, let me catch my breath after that. Thank you, Eric, and thanks to each of you inspiring women for your leadership, but also for your friendships. We call on each other, we talk about things, we get a lot of things done. So it has been just a tremendous honor and privilege to serve as president of one of the largest Rotary clubs in the world. And I'm also honored to serve in your company. So thanks a bunch. You're special ladies to work with. I would like to give Lee the opportunity to share some words of welcome for all of us from Kiwanis. Lee, thank you for being here today, and all you fellow Kiwanians. We're so delighted to have you in the room for this special program.
Thank you, Brenda. I have to tell you that it has been a pleasure to serve in many different functions with leaders like Brenda, getting to know new leaders. It is amazing. Like Brenda, I'm the fourth president of our club, good number, behind other women leaders that you may know. Ann McMillan was the first, the trailblazer, and Flory and Donna Smith, as well as our vice president and soon-to-be president-elect, Dr. Tracy Morant Adams. I am honored to be part of one of the largest service communities in the nation, and for the ability for one of the largest Rotary clubs and the largest Kiwanis club to have opportunities to jointly gather after an extended pandemic hiatus. It is awesome to see a full room. I look forward to hosting Brenda and the Rotarians with our Kiwanians at a Kiwanis meeting later this year. And with that, thank you again for the opportunity to have this joint meeting.
Thank you, Lee. And I too stand in great company. Sheila Blair was the first female president of Rotary, Kate Nilsson the second, and Betsy Holloway the third. So there have been great women before both of us. So good company. Before we begin the main program, we do have a few brief Rotary announcements to share as we continue to give, gather, and grow this Rotary year. I would like to thank each Rotarian who has helped our club grow as we continue working toward the development of our strategic plan. We have wonderfully engaged group of Rotarians take part in our first focus group this morning. There's one more session today at 1:15 here at the Harbert Center in the library. It will last 1 hour. If you miss signing up, it's not too late to attend. You're welcome just to drop in after the meeting. It starts at 1:15. Thank you for the opportunity taking the opportunity to share your thoughts. It's a vital part of our future, and we are looking forward to seeing some of the results in a few weeks. Thanks to Nancy Gerticke and the Strategic Planning Committee for their hard work to this initiative. Thank you, Nancy. Next, we encourage you to pay close attention to your email this week for information about all we have going on. I'm not going to go through everything, but we continue to follow the tragic situation as it unfolds in Ukraine. In your email, you will find information about several ways you can support relief efforts for the people who are suffering so much in that country. Also, you'll find information about several upcoming service opportunities and tickets for the Rotary Trail Party. It's coming up in April. They're on sale now. You won't want to miss it. After last week, if you were here, you know you do not want to miss it. You'll find the link and all the details in your email. We would also like to thank Rotarian Greg Wheeler, General Manager of the Blazer Sports Property, who donated 4 tickets to the UAB baseball game tonight versus Alabama. We drew a winner from the Rotarians who signed up to participate in our focus groups today, and Sean Culhane is the lucky winner of the tickets. So Sean, I think I saw you here. So please come up after the meeting to claim your prize. That'll be fun, a fun event. Finally, we hope you will join us next week when we will welcome Jack and Rebecca Drake, who will discuss their formidable art collection with the Birmingham Museum of Art. Hugh Call, curator of contemporary art, Holly Ringland, and the museum's director emerita, Gail Andrews, will also be here with us. Now, for our main program, we're very excited. Now, it is my great pleasure to welcome a great friend, fellow Rotarian, Spencer Backus, to introduce you to the incredibly accomplished woman who will give our keynote today. Spencer served in our United States Congress for 22 years, and he is a director on the Export-Import Bank of the United States. He's been a member of our club since 2014. Spencer?
Well, as previously been mentioned, today or this month is Women's History Month. And what better way to celebrate Women's History Month than to have a wonderful, kind, compassionate, capable woman who has made history, and America is better for it. Let me just hit the high spots. Secretary Chao has been appointed to 2 cabinet positions, U.S. Secretary of Transportation and Secretary of Labor. She is the first Asian American woman to serve in the president's cabinet in our nation's history. She is the longest serving cabinet member since World War II. As Secretary of Transportation, she focused on keeping the country's transportation system safe and efficient, investing over $300 billion in infrastructure over 3.5 years. And she promoted, and this is very visionary, autonomous vehicles, drones, commercial space, and supersonic jets. During the COVID-19 health crisis, her decisive actions kept American transportation network open, safe, and moving. We almost need you back in the White House to crank it back up. As Secretary of Labor, she focused on increasing the competitiveness of America's workforce and the worldwide economy. She set new records in workplace safety, compensation, and retirement security. Now, these next 2 things I'm going to say to me are just delightful. She immigrated from the United States when she was 8 years old, not knowing how to speak English. She received her citizenship at the age of 19. It was her experience transitioning to a new country that motivated her to ensure that everyone has access to the opportunities in this country. This is not in the bio you're going to read, but this is a statement that she made that I think captures the essence of Secretary Chao. When I entered the workforce, there were not many women, nor many Asian Americans. So I have pretty much been the first in every job I ever had. Being different has also given me a different perspective, an outsider perspective, which makes me more compassionate, empathetic, and a stronger leader. Let me just hit two more points and I'll sit down. I'm not going to mention the various Fortune 500 countries she served on or the various nonprofits, but I do want to say two things that are so timely here today. She was director of the Peace Corps. And when she was with the Peace Corps, she expanded the Peace Corps into Ukraine, the Baltic states, Moldova, and Kyrgyzstan.
Yes.
And what a marvelous thing. Second thing, many of you know, is the United Way back in 1991 faced a crisis of credibility and leadership. Over 600 people applied for the position. The person selected was Secretary Elaine Chao. And within 3 years, she had mended all the misunderstandings with the local board, spending policies, and they collected a record amount for the poor and the needy. So with that, let me introduce a graduate of Harvard's MBA program, now serving on the advisory board of the Dean's Council there, and someone who I want everyone. Let's give this wonderful, kind, capable lady a rousing weapon. Both Rotarians and should I say Kiwis, or is it Kiwanis? So let's stand and welcome, give her a warm Birmingham welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the very kind introduction, Congressman. And you and Linda have been great friends, and it's so wonderful to see Linda as well. And thank you for your service to our country, to Alabama, and also currently at the U.S. Export-Import Bank. I also can't be in Alabama without giving a big shout out to your senior senator, Senator Richard Shelby. He is a tireless advocate for Alabama, and it was such a pleasure to work with him and his staff when I was in the cabinet. And then also, as I've heard, just coming in, March is Women's History Month. And congratulations to the three presidents, Brenda Hackney, Lee Davis, Cameron Shevlin. We're so proud of all of you. I also want to thank John and Betty McMahon for inviting me to return to Birmingham. Now, of course, Brenda had a big hand in that, and she was looking for someone, and John very nicely mentioned my name. But I was actually introduced to Birmingham on May 9th, 1997. I know some of you guys here aren't even born yet, probably. I was an honoree for the biannual Birmingham Southern College Gala, and that began my love affair with the Birmingham community. I joined the board of Protective Life, and I understand that Johnny Johns, then CEO, is currently here in the audience, and he and his wife, Dr. Nanny Dunlop, are just a power couple. And then I also understand there's a table here with Vulcan, because I joined Vulcan's board as well. And having been president of United Way of America, I can also say that Birmingham was known as one of the most charitable, generous communities in the whole country. So I'm delighted to be back in Birmingham. But today, let me talk a little bit about the economic situation, especially given the world instability and the situation with Ukraine, inflation, the workforce, and the supply chain. And then also, I want to talk about the implications of the new infrastructure law for Alabamans and, most excitingly, the transportation systems of the future. So the Ukraine situation is heartbreaking, tragic, and obviously deeply troubling to all of us. And as you've heard Congressman Baca say, it holds special poignancy for me because I launched Ukraine's first Peace Corps program shortly after its liberation from the former Soviet Union in 1992. One of my first initiatives was to start the Peace Corps program in the Baltic nations of Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, and the newly independent states of the former Soviet Union, including Ukraine. We recruited a new class of Peace Corps volunteers who were older, had more business experience, held MBAs, and they were able to help former Soviet Union satellites transition from central state-run economies to new free enterprise systems and take advantage of the opportunities that freedom offers. And once people have freedom, they don't want to give it up. President Zelensky gave a very moving, emotional plea for help to the United States Congress last Wednesday, March 16th. He has provided such courage and inspiration to the world, and the world community needs to be doing everything we can to help the brave Ukrainian people maintain their independence and freedom. You know, the war in Ukraine has contributed to the increases in prices, but inflation started to climb in the spring of 2021 before the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Prices have risen almost 8% over the past year. I went by a gas station as I was coming here, and gasoline prices, the least expensive was $4.16. That's incredible. Inflation is the highest since the early 1980s. Mortgage rates now top 4%. We've all seen inflation every day in our daily lives. When we go shopping, fill up with gas, as I mentioned, go out to eat. I went to a local Burger King. I have a 96-year-old father. He's very successful now, but he loves making jokes, and he calls Burger King his club. So we went to Burger King this past Saturday, and the prices that the cashier was charging didn't match the menu board overhead. So I asked what was going on, and the store manager said they could not keep up with the price changes. This is hurting the most vulnerable within our midst. And inflation is posing a real threat to our economic growth because as inflation expectations become embedded in the economy, people lose confidence. Workers rightly demand higher raises because real wages are declining. And retirees find that their savings are getting whittled away. So average hourly earnings did increase 5.1% in February, year over year, but real wages are declining. And this extremely tight labor markets and the feedback of inflation on wages is going to keep wage increases elevated. And this won't end soon. Although the war in Ukraine did not cause inflation, the negative supply shock stemming from the rise in oil and commodity prices caused by this conflict will increase inflation in coming months. And the only way to get inflation down is for the Fed to raise interest rates. Now, last week, the Fed did raise the federal funds rate by about 25 basis points, but additional increases are needed to get us down from this 8% inflation. Now, the Fed wants to move against inflation, but it also does not want to risk slowing the economy in an election year. And so the Fed is in a tough spot right now. And what we are seeing is that the Federal Reserve presidents, they all want to raise interest rates because they can see raises prices, hikes around the country, but the board does not. So as I mentioned, the Federal Reserve is in a tight spot. And as the former Secretary of Labor, I'm also concerned about America's workforce. The unemployment data for February were better than expected. The economy created 678,000 net new jobs, and the unemployment rate declined to 3.8%. The labor force participation rate rose to 0.1% to 62.3%. but this is still lower than when I was Secretary of Labor. The average labor participation rate when I was Labor Secretary was 66.4%. Now, if the labor force participation rate were at these levels, there would be over 10 million more workers in the workforce. And in February, the good news is job gains were concentrated among those with less skills in education. And what this shows is that growing economies help everyone. Those with little experience and less education and skill sets went into the leisure and hospitality sector, retail, trade, education, and health services. These are low-paying jobs, but they give young people a start and hopefully advance to higher skilled jobs with higher pay. Now, most people you may not know who earn minimum wage migrate out of minimum wage in 2 years. The sectors that are paying more than average wages include transportation and warehousing, professional and business services, and construction. But these days, basically no one is paying minimum wage. Minimum wage workers who are receiving minimum wage are about 1% to 2% of our economy. Because the economy is so vibrant, there's such a demand for workers, so that is fueling the increase in wages. But there's a lot of talk about income inequality. And let me say a few words about that. There are many reasons for income inequality. And this topic can be a speech in itself. The reasons for inequality or differential include differences in the number of family members who work, because 2 wage earners earn more than 1 wage earner. Then there's a choice of educational degrees. This is something you got to tell the kids. Engineers earn more than art history majors. Just a fact of life. There's a choice of hours. Another life lesson. People who work 80 hours a week earn more than people who work 35 hours a week. There's also the choice of profession. Dangerous jobs such as mining and working on an oil rig pay more than less dangerous jobs like working in a store. America is also seeing more income differential because of cultural reasons, such as more single parents and divorces, and demographic factors such as people living longer lives and living off of savings and Social Security. But there's one important aspect about income differential, and that is the different levels of education attainment. Our economy is an information economy. Most jobs now require some proficiency in information technology. For example, the custodians, we used to call them custodians, they're now called custodial engineers. But they used to wear these heavy tool belts, remember? Now they only have a handheld device that gives them incredible information about the heating, air conditioning, and other systems within their facilities. So what does this mean? This means that we need to tell our young people they've got to stay in school, get a good education. It doesn't have to be a 4-year degree. It can be a 2-year associate degree or a professional certification like computer programming or information technology. And community colleges with their low tuition are a wonderful choice for professional training that leads to high-paying jobs for our young people and without debt as well. So COVID-19 has brought the term supply chain, someone's doing this, into everyday vocabulary. And the supply problems showed in the employment and information data. So even though people want to buy cars, manufacturers can't get enough semiconductor chips. So that's why there's such a wait for new cars. When I was Secretary of Labor, the department launched an index called JOLTS, Job Openings and Labor Turnover Survey. This measures the dynamism of our economy and shows how many people have left jobs, how many people are going to jobs, how many jobs are vacant. Because of this survey, we now know that there are 11 million unfilled jobs, and there's a worker shortage. With employers competing to hire workers, we're hearing a lot about the great resignation, and workers have greater leverage than ever before. More workers now want remote or hybrid work, and companies are even advertising remote work as a competitive tool. And it's not enough for employers to just pay higher wages, because some workers now look for work-life balance, and they are willing to sacrifice monetary compensation to achieve it. The American Trucking Association says that the trucking industry needs about 80,000 additional truckers today, and the shortage could be as high as 160,000 by 2030. So during the national lockdown, which began March 13th of 2020, as Secretary of Transportation, as Spencer mentioned, I focused on keeping the supply chain open, safe, and moving so that store shelves can be full and the movement of essential equipment and personnel like medical personnel could continue. Now let's go to the next slide. The historic CARES Act, signed on March 27th, 2020, injected $2 trillion, that's $2 trillion with a T, stimulus, which was needed at the time to help workers, employers, and the economy. You would not be surprised to hear that some of these funds are still unspent. And then on March 11th, 2021, President Biden signed into law another $1.9 trillion stimulus program. The states are awash in cash. And so Larry Summers, former Treasury Secretary under President Clinton and National Economic Director under President Obama, warned that additional stimulus would increase inflation. And he was right. The tremendous stimulus programs in America have had global impacts, driving demand up in Asian manufacturing centers. And now producers can't get the raw materials and other inputs they need, and employers can't get the workers that they need, thus slowing economic growth. So producers and retailers are ordering more than they need because they don't know if the orders are going to be ready. And so this is increasing the pressures on demand. Next slide. So supply chain problems are showing everyone the importance of infrastructure. And supply chains are just a fancy way of talking about transportation, which depends on good infrastructure. Ports are critical to a growing economy and also to job creation. Over 70% of trade goes on water. West Coast port problems with ships waiting for days, sometimes months, to unload are not seen here at the Port of Mobile. In 2021, container volume at the Port of Mobile increased over 18%. And the port has been running smoothly despite record traffic. And in 2018, I'm so pleased that when I was secretary, the department awarded the Port of Mobile $13 million for an auto terminal. But let's not forget, the government is not the only source of funding. Pension funds, endowment funds, and private investors are interested in investing in public infrastructure as well. And they should be allowed to. And in many states, they are not. Next slide. And so as Secretary of Transportation, I worked on reducing the time to invest in federal infrastructure to make it easier and less expensive for the state and the private sector to work together to invest in infrastructure. One of my first trips was to Alaska to deliver an environmental assessment that some person thought it was a good idea for me to announce. This environmental assessment took 37 years. It was called the Sterling Highway, I kid you not. After I looked at that, I wasn't sure that was really good news. To wait 37 years, but this was a road to a remote Alaskan village, which had critical importance in terms of medical emergencies and access. But this initiative of trying to compress and also reduce the wait time for our projects is called One Federal Decision. It was bipartisan, and it's included in the new infrastructure bill. And that the US investment, I think, would be more attractive if burdensome regulations could be streamlined so that projects could be approved faster. And then also limitations on tolling federal roads and bridges could be relaxed so that private companies can invest in repair and new constructions. And then states could be given more flexibility in how they spend the Highway Trust Fund. States' share of the Highway Trust Fund, paid for by you with your gasoline taxes, are now returned with detailed instructions on how to spend those funds. So states should be trusted to spend the money as they see fit because Alabamans certainly know how to spend their money, your money, better than anyone in Washington. And then next, let me talk about the Infrastructure Act, which was passed and signed last November. This is going to result in a stream of transportation funds for our country and for Alabama. Now, I know Alabama lawmakers are terrific. They are always looking out for the taxpayers and for being frugal in their use of taxpayers' funds. I wish that the infrastructure bill that we proposed in the last administration had been allowed to pass, because it would have provided a lot more public-private partnerships and leveraged private sector funds to finance public infrastructure, provided more actual dollars for infrastructure rather than other non-transportation related infrastructures. But now that the law has passed, Alabama should get its fair share. So based on estimates from the US Department of Transportation, listen to what Alabama is going to get. Over the next 5 years, Alabama should expect to receive about $5.8 billion for highways and bridges, $140 million for airports. Based on formula funding, Alabama would receive $400 million over the next 5 years for public transit, $79 million for the expansion of electric vehicle charging stations, as well as an opportunity to compete for a share of the $2.5 billion in charging systems. The Infrastructure Act sets aside $100 million to expand Alabama broadband coverage, including access for 565,000 Alabamans who are currently lacking it. Plus, 1.5 million people will be able to apply for the affordability, connectivity benefit, which basically helps low-income families pay for internet access. And over 5 years, Alabama will receive approximately $32 million for highway safety traffic programs to improve driver behavior, reduce deaths and injuries from car crashes. Plus, there are funds to make rail crossings safer. Alabama will be able to compete for a share of about $10 billion to improve rail lines and $5.5 billion for grade crossing safety enhancements. And then Alabama will also be able to compete for its share of $16 billion set aside for economically significant bridges, aside from the formula, and a share of the $15 billion to benefit diverse and low-income communities as well. Now, guidelines for these grants are being written by the Departments of Transportation, Energy, and Commerce. And under this administration, these new criteria will stress greatly social justice, equity, and diversity in addition to merit. And so Alabama needs to keep that in mind. Alabama needs to build strong coalitions. Next slide, is it? Yeah. And project proposals to ensure that your state gets the funds and that they are well spent and equally divided in the state. The state needs to work out how needs might have changed after the pandemic and what projects are most important. After the pandemic, more Americans want private cars and individual transportation. They want the flexibility of working some days at home. And this reflects Americans' post-pandemic desire to drive in their own cars, to be safe from the Omicron variant and all other future variants. And so this is what's happening, and your proposals need to reflect all of this. My first priority as Transportation Secretary was safety. Safety is always number one. My second priority was to reinvest in our country's infrastructure. And as I mentioned, we invested over $300 billion, even without an infrastructure bill. My third goal was a really fun one. My third goal was to prepare for the transportation system of the future. So let's go on and talk about the first one, and that is autonomous vehicles. Autonomous vehicles is emblematic of the changes in transportation technology. And so I want to touch upon the emerging technologies that will change the way we travel in the future, like autonomous vehicles, drones, supersonic flights, commercial space. The pandemic intensified changes that were already taking place before COVID was a household word. People were already ordering more online. conducting more business and social interactions virtually, and choosing new mobility options such as Lyft and Uber and electric scooters. Now, COVID has changed how goods get transported as trips change from personal to commercial. And the more online purchases, the more needed are the US Postal Service, FedEx, and UPS. More than 38,000 people died in car crashes in 2020. And although miles driven were lower than in 2019, the fatality rates are higher. And research shows that 94% of serious crashes are due to human error. So advanced driver and assistance programs and automated driving systems can significantly reduce human error and save thousands of lives. Automated vehicles can also help on the commercial side. Our recent supply problems illustrate how technology can be a solution to augment the shortage in truck drivers mentioned earlier. Trucking companies are pioneering autonomous technology that will allow long-haul trucks to operate without a driver. Trucks use cameras, radar, and LiDAR to see the road while advancing these simulations. So you have AI basically simulating 1,200 scenarios each second to predict what other vehicles will do and determine the safest way to drive. This technology is poised to transform the safety and efficiency of freight trucking. A 600-mile route takes a human driver around 22 hours to complete, including a federally mandated 10-hour rest period. Autonomous trucks, though, never get tired or distracted, allowing them to operate beyond hours of service driving limits for human drivers. So an autonomous truck could do the same trip in 12 hours at a lower cost and higher level of safety. So let's move on to drones. Drones used to be solely the province of the military, but now anyone can buy a drone for less than $1,000 with video cameras and a GPS device. This new move to e-commerce is perfect for drone innovation. Drones can carry packages the last mile, either from a store's warehouse or from a delivery truck. They're being tested for package delivery and other e-commerce operations. And industries are using drones. They're seeing immediate use for drones because they're using them in all different kinds of commerce, in aerial photography, in emergency management, in precision agriculture, and infrastructure inspections and monitoring like power plants or miles of railroad tracks. Now, some people are concerned about their noise, security, and privacy. Some people have mentioned they don't want drones looking in on the second floor window. I get that, which is why regulators need to address legitimate public concerns about safety, security, and privacy without hampering these new innovations. Well, as getting things fast, Americans also like to go fast. So supersonics are coming back. Now, there were many problems plaguing the old Concorde, and I think there's some of us here who remember the Concorde, noise pollution being one of them. There are now companies trying to make quieter aircrafts with sustainable fuels. And a trip from the East Coast of the United States to London, a trip that usually takes 7 hours, can be compressed to 2-3 hours. One company is planning to roll out supersonic travel by 2029. And the US Department of Transportation, under my tenure, also contributed to commercial space innovation by streamlining launch and re-entry licensing requirements, which reduces red tape. So space launch operators could use a single license for multiple launches from multiple sites, and prescriptive requirements were replaced with flexible performance-based criteria. So in 2020, the FAA licensed over 30 space operations. There were about 50 more space operations in 2021. And when space tourism begins, it's going to happen. That number could increase to over 100 operations per year. That could drive the value of the new space economy to as high as $1 trillion by 2040. Richard Branson, Jeff Bezos, and other billionaires took space flights this past year. American innovation powered all this growth, including reusable rockets, air launch systems, and other technologies that are reducing costs of space flight. So these new technologies will transform the way we work and move. Is there another slide or that's it? You know, we live in a wonderful country where there's peace and stability. And that point is brought home to us more than ever as we see what's going on in Ukraine. It's a place where our dreams come true. America's a place where we view our potential as our birthright. And so we need to treasure what we have. We are so lucky to be Americans, and transportation is a vital connector that enables our mobility, our productivity, and our quality of life. It's great to be back in Birmingham. Thank you so much for having me again.
Wow, thank you. Secretary Chair, we thank you so much for joining us today. What an impressive career you've had and what such a wealth of knowledge and experience you have shared with us today. We do have some time for questions from the floor. If you have something to ask Secretary Chao, you can stay at your table and raise your hand, and Bets will bring a mic so that everyone in the room can hear the question, as well as our folks on Zoom. Again, please speak directly into the microphone so that everyone can hear. We're going to start the questions off. Secretary Chao, please come back to the podium. Lee Davis is going to start us off, and then we'll
Great.
start. By then we'll get some from the audience.
So I was taking a lot of notes. I don't know about y'all, but there was so much to take away. But I loved the inspiring story that was shared about your coming to the United States, learning to speak English as a young child, and gaining citizenship, and just doing all that you've done, but particularly knowing that sometimes you had many times a unique seat at the table. As we think about the issues going on in the world, as we think about the opportunities with the infrastructure and economic development and the labor market, what would you share with this audience regarding making sure that there are unique voices at the table?
Just take a look at this dais. This is very different. I think even 10, 15 years ago, this would not have been the case. Sometimes I feel as if our country is criticized too much. We're a work in progress. And as a young, aspiring American, not a citizen yet, I read Alexis de Tocqueville when he came to America in 1834 and talked about this new experiment, this democracy in America. And he remarked upon this incredible tendency for Americans to come together in voluntary associations to solve community problems. This is a huge, it's a huge differential within our country that we are a young country. We welcome those who come into our midst. And sometimes, again, I think we're much, much too harsh on ourselves. Our country changes and it improves and it learns. And as embodiment of that, I mean, I'm here before you. I can tell you that someone once said, I would never, if someone who was blonde hair and blue-eyed would never get into the Politburo of the People's Republic of China. So I think our country is changing. The diversity is already happening, and I'm very optimistic. And as I mentioned once again, take a look at the dais and the leaders that are on at the table here.
She's going to go around and get the mic. Yeah, on this side of the floor.
Thank you very much for coming today. Really interesting talk. As an immigrant yourself, how would you suggest that this country go about solving its immigration challenges?
You know, I actually had 4 or 5 policy implications, but I thought you guys aren't interested in hearing that. You don't want to hear lectures. I think our immigration system needs to be reformed. And I think it's very complicated. And the one issue that separates the both parties, that separates the parties, is the whole issue about amnesty. And the Republicans want legal migration, and the other party doesn't quite care so much. And so that is what is holding us up. But I think the current immigration system needs to be reformed to allow for greater legal migration, especially in the more skilled areas. We have a tremendous dearth of skilled workers, engineers, of people in the STEM fields, and we should be attaching, as Senator Shelby has said himself, a visa to every diploma that UAB issues to people who are studying STEM. So we educate all these young people throughout the world, and at the end of their college or master's or PhD, without a visa, they have to go home. There's some good in that as well, in that they bring aspects about America to their home country, but we also lose our investment in them in the last, for the time that we invested in educating them in the last 4 years for college, 2 years for master's, or 7 years for a PhD. But I think, the policy's never the hard stuff. What I have found, it's the people. It's always the people. And how do you build consensus? How do you bring people around? That is the issue. So I think there's been lots and lots of, examples of what can be done with immigration, but we certainly need to have a reform system. And as I mentioned, the amnesty part is what's holding up the negotiations on both sides.
I think the next question is right here in the middle.
Honor to you, Madam Secretary, for your history and your legacy. My question, the rail system in China is something wondrous to behold. It's all over China, trains are going over 200 miles an hour. The time from Beijing to Shanghai is 4 hours. That's New York to Chicago in 4 hours flat. Now, we have the Acela up in the East Coast, but that's all. And I'm wondering what the future might hold here. Is this difference because of government decisions, or is it because of the free enterprise competitive spirit of our private enterprise?
That's an excellent question. I'm going to answer them in turns. Number one, China can build a road in 18 months. It takes us, with our environmental impact statements and various other studies, probably about 16 years. And secondly, I actually had worked when I was Deputy Secretary of Transportation to increase high-speed rail along the Northeast Corridor. But high-speed rail needs a straight right-of-way. And the Acela, traveling from Washington to New York to Boston, curves, and it's circuitous. It kind of goes, it's a snake-like path, so it can never pick up the speed enough to be able to hit high-speed rail. And unlike China, we can't move towns and communities and cities. It's just one of those things. But then the second thing also is Americans love our cars. We love our cars. So it is part of our birthright. What's the first thing that an American does? First thing that my family did when we became American citizens, we went out there and we bought a car. So we love cars. But under this recent budget, the Biden administration has increased the budget of Amtrak from its current level of $2 billion to $80 billion. Now, there are a lot of businessmen here, so you know what that means. I don't know how they're going to spend it. I think every Amtrak infrastructure project will have a good chance of being funded. And so we'll see. There might be some plans to build out the long distance Amtrak, but the demand is what's the problem. A lot of Americans don't want to go the scenic route and take 3 days to cross the country on Amtrak. And so the demand will be a major concern as we talk about long-term rail. But there's also high-speed rail other places. There's a promising high-speed rail project between Houston and Dallas. And there's one between Nevada and California. So rail is an alternative, but it needs a density, which in our vast country, we don't quite have, and we basically subsidize every transit system in America, and we subsidize basically Amtrak everywhere except for the Northeast Corridor.
Down here, Bets.
Elaine, since you first went to Washington in 1983 as a White House fellow in the Reagan administration, you've served 4 presidents of one party, and you've seen from a fairly close vantage point 3 presidents of another party. Can you talk about presidential leadership and presidential management styles?
I need to thank John. John was actually on the panel that selected me. So I want to give a big shout out to John Sexton. Also, my fellow White House fellow in the year of 1983, 1984, Ken Simon is over there as well. So John has actually contributed so much to the White House Fellowship Program. And John, thank you for your service to our country. I think each president is different. Each president has their own particular style, and you kind of adapt. And, you know, it's hard to say. When I was starting out, I wasn't that close to President Reagan, because if I ever got even close to his chief of staff's office, it would have made my day. And the Bushes are known for their projects, and different presidents are also emblematic of their times. And that's another issue. But I think regardless as to what happens in terms of presidential leadership, I think the strength of this country is the might of its people. And that's what is shown in the Constitution and how we govern ourselves. And that is what is so beguiling. So as other countries, and I'm going to digress, as other countries try to import their soft power, there's no country's soft power that is beguiling and as appealing as America's, because we say to people, you can be yourself, you can do whatever you want to. And the phrases are, I gotta be me. I asked a young Chinese reporter, this is a while back, in China, and she spoke perfect English, 21 years old, cute as a button. And I said to her, what do you want to do with your life? Expecting she would say, I want to be a doctor. I want to be a research assistant. I know, really serious answer. And she said, I just want to have fun. She learned that from the movies. She learned that from America. So our soft power is so powerful. And that's why everybody else wants to come to America.
Well said. All right.
Madam Secretary, thank you so much for your time. Just quick to find my comment. 120-year-old family distribution business. My brothers and I were driving tractor trailers when we were 16. We're dying for drivers. Can we reduce those qualifications some?
I think that was an editorial mark.
Was that it, or is it?
There's one in the
Yeah.
last question in the back.
Thank you for your comment.
Good afternoon. As the rules and regulations for funding for the bipartisan infrastructure law takes shape, are there any parallels or directives for states to be inclusive for women and minority-owned businesses, not just in construction, but also in professional services?
I don't know about that, but that's always been an emphasis. And if I may offer a word of advice, and that is each department has their own rules and regulations as well. So it's important to go on the website of each department and find out what their goals are for women and minority-owned businesses. When I was in office, I actually held workshops because it's very difficult to maneuver, especially if you are a small business person. you don't have that much resources. You don't have an army of consultants or whoever who can help you maneuver. And so I've actually had workshops. And when I was at transportation, we had a module for small and disadvantaged and women businesses to kind of lead them along the way. Because some of them will ask me for grants. And I would say, I would love to give you a grant, but I don't look too good in stripes. So, but what I can do is to tell you, give you the roadmap so that you can navigate yourself. And I don't know whether some of those programs are still ongoing. I hope they are, because I think those kinds of programs are very helpful in helping more people who are not used to working with the federal government to understand where their needs are. But thank you for asking that question.
Thank you. Wow, Secretary Chao, thank you so much for joining us today. It truly has been a delight. Great questions from the audience. Thank you. To show our appreciation, Secretary Chao, we're making a contribution to our scholarship fund, our Rotary Club of Birmingham Scholarship Fund, in your honor. And we would also like to have give you a copy of our four-way test written by our own past president, Dr. Bill Hall, as a token to take home.
Thank you. I was just admiring this up here. Thank you.
Good, good, good. Kiwanians, thank you again for joining us today. Lee and Cameron, what a special thank you to both of you. Dawn, thank you for that great invitation. And of course, Spencer, thank you for the great introduction. As Rotarians, we look forward to seeing you next week when we welcome a panel discussion for the Drake Art Collection. We hope you have a wonderful week, and this meeting is adjourned.